everybody, how's it going? I hope everyone's holding up with all this corona madness. I am here by popular demand to show you how I draw eyes. So this is not perfect. It's not something that I claim to be the right way to draw stuff. This is just how I personally go by the process. You want to start first by a 3800 by 3800 pixel dimensions for your drawing. So usually that's what I start out with because I think that's like the perfect canvas size for the eyes that I draw, since I'm not planning on drawing a mouth or anything like that. So I am using Sketchbook by Autodesk. It is my favorite program, and it is the only program that I really use. I don't really mess around too much with Photoshop, though I have tried. It's not something that I really dig too much. So I'm actually in the middle of my Zodiac series, so I'm working on the Cancer colors. So Cancer for the Zodiac sign is a silvery gray blue. I am starting to believe that I'm low-key colorblind, because sometimes colors that look one way to me are not the way that they look to the majority, so bear with me. I think that I look silvery gray, but I mean, I'll let you guys be the judge. So here with the eyebrows, I usually do that sweeping out motion. As you can see, I do have the symmetry turned on. It helps things move quicker, plus it helps minimize errors. I am really horrible with symmetry. I'll be the first to admit that. It's something that I'm still actively working on. Not on digital, but like on paper, and something that I still work on. But digitally, I like to take advantage of the tools that I have and take advantage of that symmetry tool to make sure that everything is perfectly symmetrical, because honestly, that's just something that I've always really liked about digital art. So when starting out with the eye shape, you can kind of see that I did kind of like a lime lemon color. You sweep in from the tear duct and then kind of go out. So this motion, this shape, is something that's going to take a lot of practice. I don't even like the way my eye shapes come out all the time, but I work with it only because of how So initially I didn't really like the way the shape of the eye came out, but using the airbrush tool and then placing it on a separate layer, I forgot to mention that I did create a separate layer for this airbrushing process. The reason for that is you want to make sure that you're making a separate layer when you're adding something on for depth, because if you don't like it, then you don't have to scrap everything. So after you have your basic line down, you just really want to blend. Like, I cannot stress that enough. You take the blending tool and you blend that out, smudge it out, just like if you were doing your own makeup, for everybody that does makeup out there. So honestly, just keep blending out until you're happy with it. So if you can see, I just created a new layer. So this layer is going to be the eyeball color layer. So in this layer, like I said previously, before I sped it up a little bit there, you want to make sure you're creating a separate layer when you're adding anything that could create depth. So that's pretty much everything. So after you put your base layer on, then you have your other layer where you do the eyeliner and you kind of smudge it out. And then from there you add another layer, and that's kind of the eyeball color. So if you see where I'm going with this, you're basically making a layer every time you're trying to create something with depth. You don't want to do everything on one layer, because that can really super mess up kind of like your whole flow of everything if you add something that you're not down with, and it's crossing lines with something that you do like, and then you have to kind of scrap everything. Like, I've definitely done that before, where I was working on something amazing and I added something, I didn't like it, and it was just too much to undo, and it just was a mess. So always create a second or other additional layers when you're adding something that creates depth. So as you can see, I created another layer, and this is where I'm going to be working on the iris. So you can see I started kind of with the darker gray color for the actual color of the eye. So I've tried it a couple of different ways. I've tried starting with the lighter color first, and then building with the darker color to add depth around the iris. But you know, I've found that this is the best method for me. Oh wow, I turned into Sylvester Stallone there for a second. So the best method for me was starting with kind of like that darker color as the base of the iris. Then you can see that I added in a lighter color, and I'm also kind of lightly tracing with the airbrush tool when it comes to, you know, kind of adding more depth around the iris. As you can see, I use the airbrush tool a lot. I know some digital artists absolutely hate that tool because they say it's an overused tool. I say such is life. I really like the tool. I think it works best for me for the kind of art that I do. So, you know, I say la vie, do whatever you want to do. Use whatever tool you want, however unpopular it may be. So as you can see, I'm adding depth in there. You start with the darker color first, and you add in lighter colors. You can do this with any combination of colors. So you start off with that dark color, then you start adding the lighter colors on the inside and kind of working in with the blending brush. You're kind of switching in between the airbrush tool and the blending brush. So from there, you can kind of create a little bit more depth to kind of just go with what you think looks best. So there's not much more explaining that I can do with this apart from honestly just working with what looks best. So if it looks kind of funny, keep adding, keep taking away, keep adding, keep taking away, and blending, and see how it looks. It's honestly a trial and error period. I've definitely mixed some colors that looked like total ass myself a couple of times, so honestly it's just gonna take some time. But what I can tell you when you're working with eye techniques is you want the darker colors on the outside, lighter colors towards the inside. Unless you're working on some zombie eyes, then obviously I think it might be the other way around. But typically you want, no matter what colors you're working with, you want the darker color on the bottom and the lighter colors towards the inside of the eye. So here I'm creating kind of like a shadow layer. So here is kind of where like the shadow of the eyelid would typically go over the eye, so it kind of casts that shadow. I do that for the iris, the shadow of the iris over the iris. I do it actually on the iris layer, and then the shadow over the actual eyeball goes on the layer with the eyeliner that I did initially. So as you can see, I'm kind of creating more of that depth, kind of like that sleepy, sexy, sultry eye. So I did that that's usually what I want. I kind of do more of those like lusty eyes. I really, really like the way those look. When it comes to adding the iris, again, I'm using the airbrush tool because I feel like it's a lot softer than drawing in like a harsh circle for the center of the eye. I don't know, for some reason I feel like it looks better to me. I mean, you can tell me whether you agree with that or not. I personally think that it looks best with that tool. So moving on to the highlights, you can see that I'm kind of going in with like the gray color that's on the outside of the, that's on the eyeball kind of thing, that like gray color on the outside. So with this one, you really want to kind of look at where I'm going with this. So when you're starting with the highlights, first and foremost, I'm using the ink brush tool to I push hard and then I lift up kind of to give that lighter hand look. So as you can see, I'm kind of just honestly creating the sheen of the eye, kind of like making the eye look moist and not so flat. So here you're kind of working with the moisture of the eye. So again, this is something that you want to take time on and kind of work with to see what looks best. So this isn't going to come right away. I feel like I'm barely getting it, and I've been drawing for over like 7 years. I think 4 years probably digitally. So you really do want to take your time with the highlight portion, kind of going in from the color that you used on the eyeball to a lighter color, to like a brighter white. But even then, sometimes the brighter white can be a little bit too harsh, so you might want to go one level below that in the same family of the colors that you're using. So here I am using the Glow airbrush tool. So this one kind of brings, I like using this sometimes. I mean, I used to use it a lot. I use it a lot more sparsely now. I don't use it as much nowadays, but this kind of, I think, adds a little bit more kind of like that mystical feeling to the eyes. So it's up to you if you want to use that and kind of experiment with it, but it is one of my favorite brushes that came when I first purchased the premium sketchbook thing. But here I'm actually drawing the eyelashes. You can use kind of like that correction tool, that line correction tool that I have highlighted at the top, that's one over to the right of the symmetry tool. So this one I feel like kind of helps with, oh God. So I was using the glow brush and I was wondering why it was looking so awkward. Yeah, I just realized it just now. So make sure you're using your ink brush tool, not your airbrush tool. So you want your ink brush for this one because it creates kind of more of that crisp line that you can kind of fade out to like a point with the eyelashes. So eyelashes, I've heard for some people, are a problem. It's kind of like that press down, flick up motion, press down, flick up motion, press down, flick up motion. So it takes some practice. Eyelashes kind of came a little bit more naturally to me. I didn't have that much trouble drawing them once I learned how to do them initially. So honestly, just keep practicing. You want that, remember, push down, flick up, push down, flick up. It's a really, really important motion, especially when it comes to creating that eyelash, that kind of realistic, sultry eyelash. Now, when it comes to like the more realistic eyelashes, I'm not about that life. I like those dramatic, non-realistic eyelashes because I just feel like they look really cool and kind of mystifying. So honestly, just once you get that like press down, flick up motion down, just like with the eyebrows, it's almost like the same deal with the eyebrows, except the eyelashes are a lot longer. So it's just kind of like that longer flick up. You can make them as dramatic or not as dramatic as you want. I personally like pretty dramatic lashes. So here I'm kind of just making some additional highlight corrections on the eye. But after you do the initial black version of the eyelashes, I'll show you what to do next. Here I'm just kind of creating kind of like that drippy, messed up eyeliner look. So I use the hairbrush tool. It's kind of like a smudging tool. And as you can see on my settings, I have the flow and the strength kind of like on the lower end. I don't want it too strong. Sometimes I do when I'm doing hair, like actual hair. I'll make that a little stronger and make the line a little thinner. But here I'm kind of adding in more of that darkness because I can see that on some portions you could kind of see that underline from my initial outline of the eye in the beginning. So I'm kind of darkening that up and then dragging down the airbrush marks with the hairbrush smudge tool. So here you can kind of get as messy and as fun as you want, or as grunge as you want, and you can do it with any color realistically. Just make sure that it's dark enough to cover the initial baseline of your eye, or at least smooth it in. So here I'm kind of creating that like reflection, or not reflection, kind of like the light portions, the light reflecting off of the eyelashes for the portions that you can't see. This helps create a little bit more depth and kind of makes it look like she has a little bit more eyelashes. So make sure you're doing this on your top layer. So this is where your original eye base layer is, only because if you're drawing the highlight of the eyelashes on the eyeliner layer, then you'll be able to see the base layer of the eyes when you kind of like swoop up, because the reflection or like the light eyelashes that you're drawing in, you'll see it, you'll see the outline of the eye. I don't know if I'm explaining that right, but you'll see it and you don't want to see that. So yeah, that's pretty much all that I'm doing here, is kind of like adding in more layers, or not layers, I'm adding in a little bit more shadows, and that's about it, folks. That's how I draw my eyes. Here, if you guys have any questions, feel free to comment below. I honestly love drawing eyes. Eyes are something that I've always been drawn, pun intended, but I've always been drawn to, like, I guess drawing, because I feel like you can see so much emotion in the eyes, and I think that it's probably one of the most important features on a human being, is just kind of that glow that you see in people's eyes when they're happy, when they're sad, etc. So that's pretty much all I got. Follow me on Instagram at artistic_arsenal. Feel free to tag me in any eye drawings that you do yourself. I love to see that. I love budding artists, because I myself am still a budding artist. Have a great day, guys, and hang in there.